Welcome, dear listener, to another journey back in time where the echoes of history whisper their secrets to us across the centuries. As the modern world fades into the background, I invite you to settle into a comfortable position, perhaps drawing a warm blanket around your shoulders as we explore the fascinating realities of medieval life together. Tonight's tale is designed to help you unwind, to ease the tensions of your day as we wander through the corridors of history. I'm always curious to know where in our global community you're joining from. Perhaps you're listening as evening shadows lengthen across your window, or maybe dawn is just breaking in your corner of the world. Please share in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is for you. I love imagining our community gathered around this virtual hearth, connected across time and space by our shared curiosity about the past. If you find these historical journeys soothing, I encourage you to subscribe so you won't miss future explorations of times long past. Each story is crafted to bring you both knowledge and tranquility as you drift towards sleep. Now, let us leave behind the hum of electronics and the glow of screens. Close your eyes if you wish, and allow your mind to travel back to the 13th century, where stone and mortar rise against the medieval sky, and where safety is not always what it appears to be. Baron William of Thornwick stood upon the newly completed eastern tower of his magnificent stone fortress, his chest swelling with pride as he surveyed his domain. The morning sun cast long shadows across the inner bailey, where servants scurried about their daily tasks, appearing as small as ants from his lofty perch. 7 years, he murmured to himself, running a gloved hand along the rough-hewn stone of the parapet. 7 years of quarrying, hauling and building, and now Thornwick Castle stands as the mightiest fortress in the county. The spring breeze carried the scents of wood smoke and freshly turned earth from the fields beyond, but William barely noticed, his attention fixed instead on the impressive thickness of his walls, the height of his towers, and the depth of his moat, all testaments to his power and wealth. "My lord," came a voice from behind him. William turned to see his steward, Geoffrey, bowing slightly at the waist. "The village reeve awaits below with the quarterly taxes, and Master Thomas the Mason wishes a final word before departing for his commission in York." William nodded, casting one last satisfied glance at his impenetrable fortress before following Geoffrey down the spiral staircase that wound tightly within the tower. The steps were narrow and steep, forcing the Baron to place his feet sideways as he descended, one hand always touching the cold stone wall for balance. Twice he nearly stumbled where the uneven steps betrayed his footing, but he thought nothing of it. Such was the nature of proper defensive architecture, designed to confound any invader who might somehow breach the outer defenses. The great hall buzzed with activity as William entered. A massive fire roared in the central hearth, filling the upper reaches of the hall with a thick haze of smoke that stung the eyes and caught in the throat, despite the high ceiling and the small openings meant to allow its escape. Servants darted between trestle tables, preparing for the midday meal, while two of William's knights argued loudly over the merits of different sword techniques. A serving girl carrying a heavy pitcher of ale stumbled on the rush-strewn floor, narrowly avoiding a collision with a page boy who raced past without looking. "Mind yourself, girl," barked the head steward, not pausing to help as she regained her balance. William took his seat in the ornately carved chair at the head table, barely noticing as his wife, Lady Eleanor, coughed delicately into her embroidered sleeve. The smoke was particularly thick today, the wind driving it back down into the hall rather than drawing it upward and out. "The taxes, my lord," Geoffrey announced, gesturing to the village reeve, who approached with a small but heavy chest. As they discussed the collection, William's youngest daughter, Matilda, aged just 6 years, darted between the tables in play with her cousin. Her foot caught on an uneven flagstone, sending her tumbling forward with a cry. Lady Eleanor rushed to comfort the sobbing child, whose palms were scraped raw from breaking her fall on the rough stone floor. "The floors in the eastern corridor are worse still, my lady," murmured Agnes, an elderly serving woman who had been with the family since William was a boy. "Young Thomas, the scullery boy, broke his arm last month when he fell on those stairs carrying linens to the upper chambers. The third such accident this winter." Lady Eleanor nodded grimly, but said nothing as she led her daughter away to tend to her wounds. Later that afternoon, William met with Master Thomas, the master mason who had overseen the castle's construction. They stood in the inner ward, the mason's weathered face serious as he gestured toward the kitchen building. "My lord, before I depart, I must speak of certain matters regarding the castle's construction," he began carefully. William nodded impatiently, eager to conclude the business and attend to more pressing matters of state. "The kitchen's proximity to the main hall without proper separation presents a fire hazard that—" "Master Thomas," William interrupted, "I have paid handsomely for the finest fortress in the region, and that is precisely what you have delivered. Thornwick can withstand any siege, any attack. These minor concerns of yours are just that, minor." The mason's brow furrowed as he tried again. "My lord, the narrow passages from the kitchen and the single wooden staircase to the upper floors mean that in the event of fire—" "In the event of fire, we shall deal with it as we always have," William said dismissively. "The stone walls cannot burn, and that is what matters. Now I believe our business is concluded." He pressed a purse of silver coins into the mason's reluctant hand. "Your work has made Thornwick impregnable, and for that you have my gratitude." As Thomas accepted the payment with a bow, his eyes drifted upward to where smoke continued to pour from the hall's roof vents, pushed sideways by the wind rather than rising cleanly upward. "Stone walls may keep enemies out, my lord," he said quietly, "but sometimes the greatest dangers are those we build around ourselves." William, already turning away to greet a visiting merchant, did not hear the mason's parting wisdom, nor did he notice the concerned glance Thomas exchanged with an old servant who limped past, her leg never having healed properly after a fall on the winding staircase the previous winter. In the gathering dusk, as torches were lit along the castle walls, the imposing silhouette of Thornwick Castle stood proud against the darkening sky, a monument to security and strength that concealed, within its very design, a multitude of daily hazards for those who called it home. The walls that promised protection from outside threats said nothing of the dangers they harbored within. The first signs of trouble appeared on a crisp autumn morning when Eleanor, a kitchen maid of 16 summers, descended the worn stone steps to draw water from the castle well. The bucket, when raised, carried not just water but a foul odor that made her recoil. Holding the rope with calloused hands, she peered into the murky liquid and noticed an unusual film floating atop its surface, catching the light in sickly rainbow hues. "Something's not right," she whispered to herself, her breath visible in the cool morning air. Eleanor had drawn water from this well since she was tall enough to work the rope, and never had it smelled of decay and earth like this. She reported her discovery to the castle steward, a thin man named Godwin who had served Baron William for 20 years. "The well water's gone bad, sir," Eleanor explained, wringing her hands in her apron. "There's a stench to it, like something's died within." Godwin dismissed her concerns with a wave of his hand. "Nonsense, girl. That well reaches deep into the earth. It cannot be fouled so easily." When Eleanor persisted, he reminded her sharply of her place. "The Baron's family has drunk from this well for 3 generations. Would you suggest they now drink river water like common peasants?" For 2 weeks, Eleanor watched in growing horror as the castle inhabitants continued consuming the tainted water. First came stomach ailments among the kitchen staff, then fevers in the guards' quarters. When Lady Matilda's youngest child developed a violent flux that left him weak and pallid, Eleanor finally gathered her courage and approached Lady Eleanor directly. My lady, she said, curtsying deeply in the solar where the Baroness sat with her needlework, I believe the castle well has become contaminated, perhaps from the new cesspit that was dug too close, or from something that's fallen in and died. The Baroness looked troubled, but ultimately deferred to her husband's judgment when he insisted their water source was beyond reproach. A stone castle must have a secure water supply, Baron William declared at supper that evening. It is what makes us impregnable during siege. These illnesses are merely the changing seasons. The castle's dangers revealed themselves further when on a blustery afternoon, a cooking fire in the kitchen leapt beyond its hearth. What began as a small blaze quickly filled the vaulted stone kitchen with choking smoke. "Water! Bring water!" shouted the head cook as servants scrambled to contain the spreading flames. Eleanor and 3 other kitchen maids rushed toward the nearest exit, only to find themselves trapped in a narrow corridor that twisted unexpectedly. "This way!" called one, pointing toward what she thought was an escape route, but it led only to a storage room with no other exit. The deliberately confusing layout, designed to bewilder potential invaders, now bewildered those who lived and worked there daily. Guards attempting to reach the kitchen found themselves equally confounded by the castle's defensive architecture. Narrow spiral staircases, built to wind clockwise so defending swordsmen would have the advantage, became death traps as smoke filled the tight spaces. "I cannot see!" cried a young page who had become separated from the others. The boy's panicked voice echoed through the stone passages before dissolving into coughs. By the time the fire was extinguished, 3 servants had succumbed to the smoke, their bodies discovered in dead-end corridors, far from any exit. As autumn yielded to winter's first bitter embrace, Thornwick Castle revealed perhaps its cruelest irony. The massive stone walls that stood firm against arrows and siege engines now trapped within them a perpetual dampness that no number of hearth fires could dispel. "Cover the windows with more tapestries," Lady Eleanor instructed the servants as frost began to form inside the castle's chambers, "and bring more braziers for the children's rooms." But the stone, which had absorbed the autumn rains, now released that moisture into the air as temperatures dropped, creating a bone-deep chill that penetrated flesh and spirit alike. By midwinter, the castle had become a breeding ground for illness. Coughs echoed through the great hall during meals, and even Baron William himself suffered from joint pains that the castle physician could not ease. "It's the dampness, my lord," the old man explained, mixing herbs for a poultice. "Stone holds the cold and wet like a sponge." In the servants' quarters, conditions grew dire as those who worked in the kitchens or tended the grounds brought in mud and moisture that never fully dried. Rushes on the floor, changed too infrequently, harbored fleas and worse. Children developed chest ailments that left them gasping through the night, while the elderly servants prayed to survive until spring's warmth might return. Eleanor, who had grown increasingly concerned about the well water, now watched as a different kind of poison spread through Thornwick's halls. "The walls weep," she observed to an older servant as they wiped condensation from the inside of a window embrasure. "They weep because they know what they contain." The old woman nodded gravely. "My grandmother used to say that wooden houses breathe with the people inside them, but stone houses breathe against us." Outside, the castle appeared as formidable as ever, its battlements standing proud against winter storms. Inside, its inhabitants huddled in damp misery, besieged not by armies, but by the very fortress built to protect them. The morning sun cast long shadows across the village of Thornwick as Sarah, the village elder, swept the packed earth floor of her modest thatch home. At 70 winters, her back bent with age, she had outlived 3 husbands and raised 7 children beneath this simple roof. Through the open doorway she could see the imposing silhouette of Baron William's castle looming on the hillside above the village. a stark contrast to her humble dwelling. "Mother, you should rest," said her youngest daughter Agnes, who had come with her children to visit. "Your hands have earned their peace." Sarah smiled, leaning on her broom. "These walls may not stop arrows, child, but they've never made us sick either." She gestured to the smoke hole in the center of the roof where daylight streamed through. "The smoke rises and leaves, taking the bad humors with it. The walls breathe with us, not against us." She ran her weathered hand along the wattle and daub wall, feeling its familiar warmth. "When rain soaks the thatch, we repair it. When the floor grows foul, we sweep out the old rushes and bring fresh ones. Simple problems with simple answers." Agnes nodded, bouncing her youngest on her hip. "Did you hear about the Baron's boy? Poor little soul never had a chance, they say." Sarah's face grew solemn. "Aye. The third child he's lost since building that stone monster. The castle that was meant to keep death out has instead locked it in." She looked toward her grandchildren playing in the sunshine outside. "Look at your little ones, rosy-cheeked and strong. They run in fresh air and sleep where the wind can touch their faces. The Baron's children are pale as mushrooms, growing in those damp shadows." Later that afternoon, as Sarah gathered herbs from her small garden, she noticed a solitary figure making its way down the path from the castle. Even at a distance, she recognized the proud bearing of Baron William, though something in his posture had changed. His shoulders, once squared with confidence, now curved inward like a man carrying an invisible burden. When he reached the village green, the Baron paused, watching the simple life unfolding around him. Children playing, women washing clothes in the stream, men repairing thatch roofs. Sarah observed him quietly from her garden, noting how his eyes lingered on the healthy children. "Good day to you, Lord William," she finally called, offering a respectful nod. The Baron approached, his fine clothes incongruous among the simple surroundings. "Sarah," he acknowledged, "your grandson Thomas works in my stables, does he not?" "He does, my lord, a good lad with a way with horses." William nodded absently. "He never seems to fall ill, even when half my household was bedridden this winter." He looked around at the simple dwellings. "Tell me, old woman, why is it that your people seem to thrive while mine sicken behind walls 3 feet thick?" Sarah considered her words carefully. "Perhaps, my lord, it is because our homes are not built to keep everything out. They let in the rain sometimes, yes, and the cold, but they also let in the sun and fresh air. They let out the smoke and the staleness." She gestured toward the castle. "Your great stone halls trap more than just your enemies." In the weeks that followed, subtle changes began at Thornwick Castle. Servants whispered about the Baron's strange new orders. Windows that had been shuttered for years were thrown open daily, even in cooler weather. Fresh rushes mixed with herbs replaced the old, moldering floor coverings. The Baron himself was seen inspecting the castle's drainage systems with Master Thomas, the mason who had built the fortress. By spring, more dramatic changes were underway. Masons chiseled new, larger windows into the south-facing walls, allowing sunlight to penetrate deep into formerly shadowed chambers. The great hall ceiling was opened with clerestory windows that drew the smoke upward more effectively. The kitchens were moved from their dungeon-like quarters to a separate building connected by a covered walkway, reducing both fire risk and smoke within the main keep. "He's turning the fortress into a sieve," muttered Sir Hugh, the Baron's master-at-arms, as he watched workers installing iron grills in new window openings. Large enough for light and air, but too small for an enemy to enter. "He's ensuring there will be someone left to defend it when enemies come," replied Eleanor, who had been elevated to the position of head housekeeper after her warnings about the well had proven tragically accurate. As summer approached, Baron William stood with Master Thomas on the newly constructed balcony overlooking the inner courtyard. "My father would call me a fool," the Baron said quietly. He believed a castle should be dark and enclosed, its occupants hidden away from any threat. Thomas nodded thoughtfully. Your father built for war alone, my lord. You build for life between the wars. He gestured to the new rainwater collection system that ensured clean water even during a siege. The greatest threat to a castle is not always the enemy outside. Throughout the following decades, castle designs across the land began to reflect these hard-won lessons. Newer fortresses featured improved ventilation systems, separate kitchens connected by covered walkways, and larger windows on inner walls. Water management improved with better cisterns and drainage. Living quarters were increasingly separated from areas of greatest dampness and smoke. The old fortress at Thornwick stood as a testament to this evolution, half monument to an older understanding of security, half pioneer of a new wisdom that recognized the enemy was not always at the gates. Baron William, who had once boasted of building an impregnable fortress against all outside threats, had learned through heartbreaking loss that true security meant protecting his people from dangers both without and within. As Sarah had observed from her humble thatch home, the strongest walls were not always those made of the heaviest stone, but those that remembered the people they were built to shelter.